When you think about the biggest fights in the history of boxing, a few obvious names come to mind. I'm talking about Ali versus Frazier, Hagler versus Hearns, Pacquiao versus Mayweather. And while there are many more that I could add to that list, there's a new matchup tonight, hoping to join that epic pantheon. Jake Paul is taking on Mike Tyson. Yep, a YouTube star is going head-to-head against Iron Mike Tyson, one of the all-time fiercest fighters in boxing history. If you think that sounds like a gimmick, you wouldn't be alone. On one side, you have Jake Paul, the former star of the Disney Channel series Bizaardvark, and the man who once released a song called It's Everyday Bro. Yes, it's as awful as you might think. He has recently transitioned into the world of boxing. Over the last few years, Paul has compiled a 10-1 record, 7 of which have ended in knockouts. But before you start thinking that Paul might be a legitimate fighter, remember, he's made sure that his opponents have included a lot of guys who aren't really known for their boxing skills. Former NBA player Nate Robinson, retired MMA fighter Ben Askren, and former UFC contender Nate Diaz, who made his boxing debut against Paul. In the other corner, a man who needs no introduction, Mike Tyson, once called the baddest man on the planet, is regarded as one of the greatest heavyweight boxers of all time. 50 wins, 44 knockouts, the youngest boxer ever to win a heavyweight title, and one of just 5 men, alongside Floyd Patterson, Muhammad Ali, Tim Witherspoon, Evander Holyfield, and George Foreman, to have regained a heavyweight championship after losing it. However, all of those accomplishments are ancient history at this point, with Tyson fast approaching the age of 60. Let's face it, most of Jake Paul's fan base knows Mike Tyson as the guy from The Hangover. If that doesn't make things clear, just know that tonight's fight will be the biggest age gap in the history of boxing in a professional fight, with an age difference of 31 years between Paul and Tyson. That was made pretty clear when the fight actually had to be rescheduled from its original date because Mike Tyson was seen in a wheelchair after a stomach ulcer knocked him out of training camp. So yeah, Mike Tyson is starting to feel the effects of getting old. Join the club. Clearly, the resumes of tonight's fighters are wildly different, but the rules of this matchup don't help the argument that this isn't just a gimmick stunt fight. Paul and Tyson will be facing off in 8 2-minute rounds, as opposed to the typical 3-minute round. And both fighters will be wearing 14-ounce gloves instead of the usual 10-ounce ones used in heavyweight matches. But guess what? None of that really matters, because regardless of what actually happens in the ring, tonight's boxing match is on pace to be one of the biggest sporting events of the year, and probably the most watched boxing match of the 21st century. It's also likely to be one of the most profitable for everyone involved. All 90,000 seats at AT&T Stadium, yes, the same place where the Dallas Cowboys play home games, will probably be filled for the fight. Jake Paul's promotion company, Most Valuable Promotions, has sold a $2 million package for those attending the fight. It includes 8 ringside seats, gloves signed by both fighters, hotel accommodations, and a post-fight photo opportunity in the ring. And sportsbooks worldwide expect this to be one of the most heavily wagered boxing matches ever. For example, BetMGM trader Alex Rella told reporters, quote, "We expect the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight to be the most bet-on boxing match in BetMGM history. Bettors want to see Paul get knocked out, and they love Tyson as an underdog. The book will be rooting for Paul to win." End quote. But most importantly, the Mike Tyson and Jake Paul showdown will be exclusively streamed on Netflix. Surprisingly, rather than making their subscribers pay an additional $50 for a pay-per-view match, the OG of streaming services is making the fight free to all 282 million subscribers worldwide in the hopes that it will drive new customers to sign up for the service. It's because of this that the Paul-Tyson fight could end up being the most watched boxing match of the century. In theory, the matchup, seen by most as a glorified exhibition fight, doesn't really matter. Instead, it's all about distribution and availability, putting this fight in a prime position to beat the 4.6 million pay-per-view buys totaled by Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao back in 2015. It's a clear sign to everyone. The old business model is due for a change. Showtime and HBO, once the heavyweight champions of boxing pay-per-view offerings, are done. And Netflix is looking to flip the combat sports model on its head by streaming fights to its subscribers without forcing them to buy a pay-per-view package. This wasn't always the plan for Netflix, though. Back in the day, the streaming titan actually scoffed at the idea of buying live sports. Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos used to go on and on about how impossible it was to make money on sports rights, famously saying, "We're not anti-sports, we're just pro-profit." But times have certainly changed. The company that put Blockbuster out of business with its direct mail-in DVD service is always ready to adapt. When Wall Street analysts started to worry that the company's subscriber growth, and more importantly, revenue, was stalling in a post-pandemic world, Netflix ended up introducing a cheaper, ad-supported subscription service. For all intents and purposes, the introduction of this option has gone pretty well. Netflix has 70 million monthly active users across the globe subscribed to its advertising tier, and 50% of all of their new signups in countries that offer this tier are coming through the ad subscription service. Even better, the company's stock has fully recovered, jumping 300% to set a new all-time high after falling 70% once the pandemic ended. While all of this was great news to everyone at Netflix, it has also required them to think a little bit differently about their content. For most people these days, finding something to watch on Netflix is time-consuming and occasionally disappointing. A never-ending scroll that includes a handful of all-time classic movies mixed in with mindless filler, like My Monkey Baby, about a couple who adopts monkeys as their children, or Sexy Beast, a reality show where young singles go on dates dressed in strange animal costumes. Whether that type of programming interests you or not, Netflix finally decided that maybe live sports were events you're looking into. The best example of this is with the NFL. Netflix recently agreed to pay $150 million for exclusive rights to 2 Christmas Day games this year. While they probably won't see the 3 million signups Peacock got from its exclusive playoff game last year, these Christmas Day games will help Netflix reduce its industry-leading 2% churn rate, while also providing them with premium inventory to attract advertisers. The Christmas Day games were perfect for the streaming giant because the potential audience is much bigger for holidays when people aren't at work and are looking for a reason to escape awkward family interactions, with Netflix likely to attract somewhere between 20 and 30 million viewers for their pair of Christmas Day games. Not only that though, but because of the broadcast nature of football, commercial breaks are already pre-programmed into the viewing experience, which means Netflix will run commercials to everyone watching, regardless of whether they pay for the upgraded plan or not. And if you're thinking $75 million per game is a lot of money, think again. That's roughly what Netflix spends on a mid-tier movie. Hell, they just spent a staggering $469 million for the rights to the Knives Out sequel. If anything, they got a good bargain at $75 million per game. For last year's Black Friday game, Amazon paid $100 million for one game, and Netflix is likely to get more than double the 9.6 million average viewers Amazon Prime got for their game. The NFL is happy about it too, with the league's chief media and business officer, Brian Rolep, explaining why this partnership makes so much sense.
We're really leaning into where fans are. So we've always been a sport about reach. How do you reach as many people as you can? That in these days not only means broadcast television, but it means streaming. And Netflix, as you know, is the biggest premium streamer in the world. This is really the first deal that we have done that is truly global in nature. So these games will be distributed in every country that Netflix is in, which is about 190 countries. So those things all sort of came together and seemed to make sense.
When you really break it down, that $75 million per game price tag isn't even that much money if you see what they're charging advertisers. The current going rate is $5 million per ad package. That includes multiple 30-second slots throughout the day. They've already sold out of all the inventory and might come close to breaking even before even accounting for subscriber growth and reduced churn. That's pretty incredible. This deal was a shock to everyone in sports media because it was so different from anything Netflix had ever done in the past. Sure, they've hosted a few live sporting events, but they were a lot less exciting than Christmas Day NFL games. There was the Netflix Cup, a golf tournament featuring Formula One drivers paired with PGA pros. There was the Netflix Slam, which featured an exhibition match between Carlos Alcaraz and Rafael Nadal in Las Vegas. And who could forget about the live sports adjacent roast of Tom Brady? But aside from the Brady roast, both of these other live sports offerings were canceled, despite selling out tickets, due to the event drawing less than 1 million viewers on Netflix. Netflix's foray into the NFL world is different though. For starters, it'll probably produce more compelling content than the gimmick of watching F1 drivers yell "4" on their day off. But more importantly, it signifies the type of sports content that's important to Netflix. We're talking premium events and episodic content. The best example of this strategy is their deal with the WWE. Rather than getting into a bidding war with Amazon to pay over $1 billion for the rights to some NBA games, Netflix went and signed a deal to pay $500 million a year for the exclusive global rights to WWE's Monday Night Raw. While these events won't draw tens of millions of viewers every week, it fits perfectly into Netflix's strategy because they provide year-round inventory for the platform, meaning more advertising slots, and the scripted nature of pro wrestling is easier to program around than live sports. Ari Emanuel, TKO Group CEO and parent company of the WWE, made it clear why Netflix was the perfect home for their wrestling content.
It's Netflix. They're the global leader. They're the best company with regard to sports entertainment. Whether they've done it with Formula One, whether they've done it with Tour de France. And this is kind of the next iteration as they go to live and moving into live. They're the global leader in SVOD. So for us, it kind of just strengthens the brand on a global basis with that relationship.
Which brings me back to Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. With everything I just went over in mind, this fight is another example of how Netflix is committing to their new business model. It might not necessarily be scripted or episodic, but Netflix was able to promote the event with a docuseries on the platform, and the star power of Paul and Tyson alone should attract tens of millions of viewers throughout the fight. Most importantly, though, a big success for Netflix tonight could have a huge impact on the future of combat sports overall. Think about this. The UFC's media rights deal with ESPN is coming to an end. ESPN obviously wants to renew, as the Mixed Martial Arts League is dollar for dollar probably their best media rights deal value. Now, the two parties are locked into an exclusive negotiating window through Q1 2025, but that doesn't guarantee ESPN keeps their exclusivity after that window has passed. So you can guess which streaming companies' executives have been spotted at multiple UFC events over the last year. I'll give you a hint. It's not Quibi. And if ESPN wasn't already worried, the fact that UFC is owned by TKO, the same parent company who signed the big WWE deal with Netflix, is enough to keep top executives in Bristol up at night. And this interview with TKO Group COO Mark Shapiro doesn't help their anxiety either.
Is it possible that they're a UFC partner? I think absolutely they'll be at the table on UFC. I mean, they get the UFC, they're fans of the UFC, they've been to the UFC, their kids watch UFC, and they're looking for those leagues, those brands, those kind of power sports content factories that can go global. And UFC is very much a global brand.
If I'm being realistic, though, the probability of Netflix striking a media rights deal with the UFC is still under 10%. Although that has less to do with Netflix, and it does with the fact that ESPN has paid more than people expected for their UFC rights in the past, because they want to ensure that they have all the best content they can have as they transition viewers to streaming. Having said that, if tonight's fight puts up a big number and the partnership with the WWE gets off to a hot start when it comes to Netflix in 2025, don't be surprised if Netflix starts to look more like the many traditional cable channels it put out of business. And if all goes well, Netflix might be thought of in the same way Mike Tyson thinks of himself, the most brutal and ruthless conqueror there ever has been.